Computer. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Anne Thompson, the president of the WICT Washington, DC Baltimore Chapter. And this is the latest episode of WICT Wednesdays. And our guest today is Dan Crane, who is a resident teaching artist at Shakespeare Theater Company. He's a graduate of the Pacific Conservatory for the Performing Arts, holds a BFA from Ithaca College and MFA from the Academy for Classical Acting at GW. And today I'll be talking about how Shakespeare's characters are brought to life through how they're written. So to start us off, Dan, can you give us a 5-minute primer on about Shakespeare basics? So what should we know or understand when we're talking about Shakespeare's works?
So especially for the text and for the language, we can break it down to two groups, right? So we have Shakespeare writing in prose and Shakespeare writing in verse. Prose, I like to describe as information organized by thought, and we group those thoughts together into paragraphs, and it's how a lot of writing is done today. Shakespeare wrote in a poetic style as well. Information organized by rhythm, and we'll call that verse. And his specific kind of verse was, of course, iambic pentameter, which when I approached that to high school students or junior high school students, they cringe and treat it like a dirty word. Iambic pentameter is really straightforward. It's a really easy kind of natural rhythm to language. Pentameter means penta, 5, meter, little feet, metrical feet. So there's 5 of them, usually 2 syllables per foot. And then iambic is just a rising rhythm. So it goes from something unstressed to stressed, or from short to long. So 5 of those lovely metrical feet are da-dum, 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 or but soft, what light through yonder window breaks. So it's really, iambic pentameter is just counting syllables on your fingers. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward.
Yes, okay. That's good to know. So even though people may not know the scholarly details about how the plays are put together, when you watch them, you do unconsciously react to what's happening and to what you hear. I am a particular fan of Richard III, and I've read that Richard III is written to be incantory, so the language lulls you into a spell-like demeanor. And I understand that in Hamlet, his speech changes when he realizes his father is dead. So how are these examples, these two characters, different from sort of the normal speech patterns in Shakespeare's characters?
Oh, this is great. You know, we talk about how the form informs the content. So it's not just the words that we use, it's how we organize that information that communicates meaning, status, relationship, all of that kind of fun stuff. So in terms of Richard, boy, this is a character that develops through a couple plays, right? He's in the Henry VI's, 3 Henry VI's, and then of course he gets his own play in Richard III. Pardon me. And so in that, he really isn't a baddie until late into Henry VI Part 3. He's really interesting. It's such a clever little character. Now, Henry VI's were written way before Richard III, but yeah, he is a guy who's trying to do the right thing, trying to support his brother Edward. And in Henry VI Part 2 and Henry VI Part 3, boy, Edward is terrible. He's a real cad. There are scenes that have not aged well. Me Too movement. Oh man, Edward, we got a thing to learn. So, but his brother Richard is trying to do the right thing. He's even a better brother than George Clarence is in Henry VI. Henry VI, in those plays, George Clarence betrays his brother Edward and fights for the opposite side a couple times before finally coming back and saying, I'm terribly sorry, and they take down Warwick together. It's not till the very end of Henry VI, Part 3, where Richard goes and does a terrible thing. He goes and kills Henry VI, who's imprisoned in the Tower. And it's there that we get a sense of, oh, this person's a little messed up.
Because I wondered about that.
Yeah,
I wondered if, because I haven't seen the trilogy, I wondered if it was sort of a slow sort of evolution into this wonderful villain that's in his own play, or if it was just things were going along and then I have to make a decision, and it turns out I'm a fan of the action of murder, and then I go forward with it in Richard III.
Yeah. Shakespeare is really a master at allowing the characters to evolve and change. There's a book out by Harold Bloom called The Invention of the Human. I'm not a big fan. I only say because he references this idea of psychology. I'm not a huge fan of that book. It's big enough to use as a doorstop, but I'm going to get myself in so much trouble now. It's fine. It's lovely. It's a lovely read. It's a fantastic piece of academics and literature. But yeah, Shakespeare is a master at allowing characters to change, and over the course of the play, and then when you have these histories, you see characters develop and change over the course of several plays. Margaret, oh man, Queen Margaret is another fantastic example of Henry VI in all the Henry VI plays into Richard III.
Yeah. In terms of how it's different from the other characters, Richard speaks in a certain way when he's in his own head. And I may be jumping questions a little bit, but like the soliloquy in, I guess you would call the beginning of Richard III to be a soliloquy, right? And Hamlet, his to be or not to be, Macbeth has a couple. Are those soliloquies written differently than the other characters? Like how, because you can feel that they're different, but how are they different linguistically, I guess?
Great question. To that, I would say I speak differently to different people. Like we have one kind of, we're finding our feet here. We just met each other here. And so we're learning about how each other communicates. But when I'm with someone that I'm really familiar with, take my dear friend Jack. Jack and I almost have shorthand with each other, and I can ask Jack questions that I really can't ask anyone else. I trust Jack completely. For me, when I'm on stage, I'm playing Richard or I'm playing Hamlet or someone, the audience is Jack. And so those soliloquies that are direct address, I'm asking questions that I really want answers to, even if they're tricky, even if they sound like rhetorical questions, I still want an answer back. And so in that way, in how they're focused on the person you're speaking to, yeah, they are different. They are crafted a different way. Two Gentlemen of Verona is a great example of this. In Two Gentlemen of Verona, early comedy, a problem play. It doesn't end in a nice, lovely, tidy bow. It's got some loose ends to it. Proteus is one of the Two Gentlemen of Verona. He betrays his best friend Valentine because he is crazy in love with Valentine's girlfriend, Sylvia. He has one way of communicating with Valentine, with the Duke of Milan, with all of these other characters in the play, and then he turns to the audience and says, oh my God, what am I about to do? And then 3 pages later, he turns to the audience and says, no, really, like, I'm starting this thing. I'm really going to do this thing. And then you see him working his way through the rest of the play. Yeah. It's really interesting. Hamlet is the same thing. Hamlet is turning to the audience, asking questions, difficult questions that he wants answers to, that he can't get those kinds of answers, or he can't have that kind of rapport with the other characters in the play. It's lovely. Now, you said something interesting. Is he in his own head? Is he talking to himself? I would say it's more interesting if he's talking to the audience.
Mm.
It's more interesting if he's talking to if he's including, he or she, they are including the 800 people out there in the house that are there to be a part of this experience. I think that's much more of a compelling interaction.
True, true. I never thought about the audience as almost an extension of the play character, but that truly is how they're written, is to include you in sort of the behind the scenes of what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're so eager to get back into the theater through this thing and back into a room where we're having a shared experience. Like right now, you and I, we're having a conversation that other people are observing, but they're not really contributing to. The beauty of the theater, the art of the theater is we are all in this together. We're all in the same room. We'll have a shared heartbeat, and the audience is a part of the conversation every night. And every night it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Kate Blanchett, when she was in town with Streetcar years ago, she was saying that the art of the theater doesn't exist on the page. It exists in that connection between the artists on stage. It exists between the artists on stage, and it also exists in that connection between the artists on stage and the audience, and that push-pull dynamic there. That's where the art really lives.
Yeah. That's true. That's absolutely true. Earlier you mentioned prose and verse. Can you talk a little bit more about that? So Much Ado About Nothing is written mostly in prose, right? So how did Shakespeare inject verse tactically in that play?
Oh, that's a great example of verse and prose. It's really interesting, right? Because it has to do with how is the character organizing their information. And I'd like to say that, of course, Shakespeare's crafting this, but it's the character's choice, the character's choosing, or the character's responding to something where then they have to change how they organize their information. For example, right at the beginning of the play, I think the play starts in prose or clunky verse, if anything, and then Don Pedro rolls in, and we have the soldiers, and it's all going to be great. We have a little banter between Beatrice and Benedict, and that's all in prose. And then Benedict and Claudio are talking to each other. It's in prose. The prince comes in. That too, I think, is in prose. But when Benedict leaves, it switches to verse. Every time Benedict is in a scene, it's in prose. But when he's not there, 9 times out of 10, it's in verse. And so this is an example of a character with so much gravitational pull rolling into a scene and changing the way that people speak. Yeah. And again, it's information organized by thought. It's either up here or down here in our bellies, or information organized by rhythm, and that's usually located here.
Right. Now, when I think of here, I think of sonnets and love and, all of those things. So when we talked a couple days ago, just to get set up for this, we talked about couplets and sonnets, and you mentioned that Romeo and Juliet. So can you talk a little bit more about how Shakespeare used those to show how characters interrelated to each other?
Boy, yeah, this is great. Romeo and Juliet, such great use of language, and not just use of language, but use of the structure of the language. There's a moment in this play where, what is it? It's the party scene. We're gearing up for the party scene. And it's Juliet is there to hang out with Paris, and hopefully something will happen between the two of them. And Romeo is there because he's been pressured by his buddies to crash this party, see his ex-girlfriend Rosalind, and compare her to all these other things that happen. And as that is, all these people are coming into the party, Capulet is there in verse. He's talking to a bunch of different people, and he's speaking in blank verse, which is unrhymed couplets. And then Tybalt sees Romeo. He's like, I'm gonna kick that kid's butt. And Capulet stops him, and they have an exchange in blank verse. Capulet admonishes Tybalt, says, don't do anything stupid, and then leaves. And now Tybalt has an opportunity to address either his servant or the audience. And I think it's more interesting if he addresses the audience, because then Tybalt speaks in heroic couplets, meaning that the rhyme scheme is AA, BB, CC, DD, on and on and on. And so we have an example of blank verse, and then points for style, Tybalt trying to get his credibility back with heroic couplets. And then the next thing that happens is Romeo musters the courage to jump out on the dance floor, grab Juliet's hand, and say a thing or two. And I hope I can remember it. What he says is, if I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. The rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B. It's a much more complicated thing. He's pretty clever. He's trying to get major points for style, right? Juliet responds with, good pilgrim, you do wrung your hands too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands, the pilgrim's hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Oh, look at her. She's very, very clever too. CD, CD. Romeo, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? I pilgrim, but those that they must use in prayer, right? 2 lines of blank verse. He's giving up. They're giving up. Romeo, major points for style. Oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou lest faith turn to despair. And just this cool little maybe A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. Come on. Juliet responds with, saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. And Romeo says, that move not will my prayers effect I take. G, G. And it ends with a kiss. It's a perfect Shakespearean sonnet. A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G is the rhyme scheme. That's significant points for style, right? These folks don't just finish each other's sentences, they finish each other's rhyme scheme. Of course they fall in love. If that's how they talk to each other right off the bat, what could possibly go wrong? Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Of course, it ends in a wedding and a dance. Yeah.
Right. That's when the play ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing happens after that.
That's great.
You haven't seen it. It's fine. It's all fine.
Spoilers.
Well, those were the only questions that I had prepared. So I'm going to throw it out to our lovely participants. This is the interactive portion of our program. And see who has questions for our guest. You can unmute yourself.
I'm not sure I have a question exactly, but thank you so much for unpacking that sonnet in R&J, because I just got goosebumps all over. It's just lovely to hear the talking about the language. And as an English teacher by long trade and now an instructional coach, like that's the music and the harmony in my soul. Like, thank you very much for that. I love the dialogue exchange that you broke up.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to explore it. There's so much to mine from these plays. Not just the relevance, right? Of course they are relevant. Of course they still, resonate in our world, in our lives, in a way that some of the other plays in that area, or that time, just don't. Mm-hmm. But Shakespeare really captured something special. And so there's the theme and then the story, and he stole everything. Every bit of it he stole from someone else, right? But he had this ability to craft it in such a beautiful way that touches us, right? Like that story, like that sonnet, right, from Romeo and Juliet. There's a line from Comedy of Errors that gets me every time. It just gets me right in the heart. Comedy of Errors is an early play. It's an adaptation of Brothers Menaechmus, which is terrible, misogynistic Roman dreck. There, I'm getting in trouble again. There, I'm going to be admonished by my superiors. No, Brothers Menaechmus is terrible. And so Shakespeare takes the Brothers Menaechmus and he adapts it into this kind of fun, silly little play about twins. He adds another set of twins because why not? If you don't know the play, these pairs of twins are separated, right? The Antipholuses go in separate directions. The Dromios go with them in separate directions. And one of them is searching for his lost brother. Antipholus of Syracuse lands in Ephesus. And he's like, yeah, okay, so I'll meet you at the tavern and I'm going to look for my brother and everything. And hey, go find us lodging, and off you go. And then he has this moment alone with the audience. And God, this line, he says, I to the world am like a drop of water that in the ocean seeks another drop. And it's just gorgeous, right? That just hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And yet, he's going to try, right? He's going to try to do this impossible thing. He's on this quest to do this impossible thing forever. And it's little beautiful little turns of phrases like that just make me fall in love again and again with these plays.
Dan,
Other questions?
I wanted to ask you a question about the relevance piece. And incidentally, as I've been listening to you, I'm reminded that, you know, I don't need to tell you this, the language is so archaic and so tough, right, that I always find it's just a great help to read the play in advance of seeing it, right, just to have some knowledge of what you're getting into. But one of the things I struggle with in Shakespeare, particularly modern day stagings of it, is there's been, I think, a propensity of staging to bring all of that language and all of that acting and set it somehow in modern times, right? Set it in the 19th century, the 20th century. Even recently, I saw one set in the 21st century. I don't know. I struggle with that. I don't know. Somehow I feel like I'm more of a purist and I'd like to see it in the era in which it was set. But I wondered, as a linguist so concerned with the relevance of the language, how do you feel about that? Is that an argument for bringing it forward into the modern day?
That's a really great question. I think that Shakespeare was writing for the people of his time, right? The people of his day. And we know a little bit about what that looked like, what the craft of that was like. And so we know that they didn't have fully fleshed out sets. And the costumes were modern dress. And so if Shakespeare was doing that and he was relying on the word to say, hey, we're in this place, we're in Milan, or we're in Verona, or we're in Denmark, then I can trust the language too, because the language is tricky. It's like super English. There's a lot going on. And it has a lot of imagery, but if the actor is doing their job and the director has provided the resources around to support that text, then the text should ring true. But Shakespeare's setting it for people in his time in modern dress. I think doing the same thing today is great, because what we're saying is here's the connection to who we are and what we're exploring and what we're going through right now. So to see a production of Two Gentlemen of Verona set in Elizabethan times, even though the play takes place a little bit before that, and not in England, but in Verona, I can say what's happening in the language that I'm connecting to and how does that relate to my life today. I think that's what directors are trying to do. I think that's what production houses are trying to do, which is, you know, it's one thing to sit back and luxuriate in the language, but what is it doing? Right. The question I have to when I sit down to produce a play or to pitch a play is I say, why is this play important? What is this play about? And what does it mean to us? Why should we produce it today? Do we need another Richard II? Richard II, entirely in verse, gorgeous language, beautiful, beautiful. But does it have relevance? Well, Richard II is the beginning of all those history plays. It was written later than all those history plays. Really flowery language. A lot of it is archaic. But what does the play talk about? The play talks about leadership. The play talks about what does it mean to be just? What does it mean to go too far? And so those ideas, as we head into another election cycle, boy, I want to explore Richard II. I want to take a look at that and say, yeah. And do I want to set it in Elizabethan times, even though, you know, Richard II is way before? It would be Ricardian. No, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to get in trouble. But do I want to set it there, or do I want to set it in a contemporary setting so that I can help the audience bridge the distance? Now, in terms of language, you're right. But English has changed in a way that some other languages haven't. For example, Spanish has a formal and an informal form of you. Russian, a formal and an informal form of you. Arabic, formal, informal form of you. English has moved primarily to the formal form of you and your. But the informal, well, that's frittered away, but they used to use that. So thee, thou, thy is all informal. Well, now that I know that, I can use that as a tool as an actor. And if I'm using it as a tool as an actor, then I'm allowing the audience to say, oh, what art thou? How dost thou? Like, come on, what's up? As opposed to, I really enjoy your nice shoes, or whatever it is, right? And so the use of those two formal forms, the formal you and the informal thee, thou, thy, is also another tool that I have to help tell story, to help share relationship, status, all of those things. So again, it's up to the actor, it's up to the director to make sure that the use of language is purposeful and specific. There's a great book. Who wrote it? Barry Edelstein, called Thinking Shakespeare. And the thesis throughout the book is, why this word now? God, I love that, right? Because then nothing is disposable. Everything is purposeful. You have one character from one play saying, but look, the morn and russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yond height eastward hill. And another character from another play saying the same thing in It's Now Clear Day, right? Well then, why? Why does one person organize their language like this and another person organize their language like this? There's something to be discovered and explored in all of that.
Thank you so much. I will keep a far more open mind about it.
Oh yeah,
that's great.
There's some really great contemporary adaptations of Shakespeare out there. It's really fun. Gosh, just on NT Live was a Simon Godwin's production of Twelfth Night, a contemporary take, and boy, that I've seen Twelfth Night like 100 times easily, and it got me. It really, really got me, because there's something in those characters that rings true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Dan, there were many things in the class that I found amazing. Anne will tell you when I came home.
That's why we're doing this, because
Right.
this would be a great conversation.
Two of them were, first, that, you know, there is that rhythm you talked about, but then there are parts in plays, like Anne was saying earlier, that, you know, it seems off, like that rhythm doesn't exactly, it doesn't feel like it's 10 beats, it's 11 and a half or 12 or whatever. And that was a way of Shakespeare to let the audience know that Hamlet or whoever was troubled or something else was going on. so that was the one thing that I found amazing that I learned out of that. The other was that there was no real manuscript that Shakespeare had of the play, like all bundled together and said, here it is.
Yeah, yeah. To your point about Hamlet, but there's something really beautiful about that, right? We go back to iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter is 10 syllables alternating from unstressed to stressed. But soft would light through you under window breaks from Romeo and Juliet. This is when things are going really well. He met a girl, he broke into her garden, I guess not in a creepy way. And then he says, but soft would light through yonder window breaks. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Everything's in perfect iambic pentameter. I think these characters want to speak in perfect iambic pentameter when things are going really well. And then you have Hamlet. And there's a moment in the play where things are not going well at all. He thinks that he's seen the ghost of his dead father, who he loved. It could be a spirit, it could be a demon there to mess with him. It could be just a manifestation of his own sadness. He was away when his dad died. That does a thing. He thinks his father's ghost is walking around, and his father's ghost, maybe, has told him that Claudius murdered him, his drunk uncle, who then married his mother a month after the funeral, a little month. The one person that he loves and feels like he can really talk to, Ophelia, she's been taken away from him. He can't talk to her anymore because of her father. His two best friends from college, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, aren't there for him. They're spies for the crown. And he's wrestling with, do I do this thing or do I not do this thing? Better yet, do I sit back and let things be, or do I take action and do a thing? Do I not let things be? And in that speech, his heart is broken. His heartbeat is wrong, right? To be or not to be, that is the question. It's 11 syllables, an unstressed syllable at the end. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer, there it is again, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Oh, there it is. Or to take arms against a sea of troubles, unstressed syllable at the end, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep. So there's a weird little messed up 3-beat phrase in the middle of the line, right? Well, we call that foot an amphibrac, meaning amphi, 2 sides, and brac, meaning short. So amphibrac, short on 2 sides. It used to be called feminine ending, but that's sexist and pejorative, and we don't call it that anymore. We call it an amphibraic ending. And so he has these amphibracs at the ends of the lines, and then one in the middle of the line to get back on track, to try to get back onto a regular rhythm. That's a great example of the form informing the content. Yeah, now, the other thing that's interesting with Hamlet is that there are a bunch of different versions running around. The first quarto, meaning the first it's just the play that's published, is bad. It's corrupt. It's like a bootleg copy. It was like someone in the audience, like, yeah, I'm gonna write this down and sell it. And then someone who's in the cast, like helping them flesh it out, but it's terrible. Some of the names are different. Carambus instead of Polonius, Laertes, Gertrude. And to be or not to be is a hot mess. I'll let you look that up. It's great. To be or not to be. There's the point. So there's that bad bootleg copy of Hamlet running around at the time. And then I guess when plays they weren't produced as much, they would try to get extra money by publishing the manuscript. So then there's the second quarto of Hamlet, which is totally different. And then in 1623, after Shakespeare died, some folks got together and say, let's put all these plays together into a folio. Let's put a collection of this work together and publish that. But that is, but there's discrepancies there as well. And so you have all of these different versions of Hamlet. Maybe it's a window into how these plays were performed, and then they would get adjusted through performance and change naturally over time. Maybe it was Shakespeare saying, giving rewrites. Maybe it's the actors on stage just doing something different night after night and fall into a bad habit, and that habit turns into, what we have in the script today. We don't know. I wish we were there. But yeah, Hamlet is interesting. We don't have anything in Shakespeare's own handwriting. We're guessing his signature a couple times, but that's it. These plays aren't in Shakespeare's hand. So we're relying on other information, other published documents rolling out. Every bit of it is subjective, and that makes it all the more fun. Other questions, thoughts?
Fascinating. Yes. Any
Yeah.
other questions for Dan? All right, then thank you very much for joining us. This has been
My
great.
pleasure.
And a lot of fun. And I'll look up the Barry Edelstein book reference that
Yes.
Dan mentioned, and I'll put it in the YouTube comments. And thank you again. And we are looking forward to Shakespeare Theatre Company reopening and coming to lots of performances. So Dan, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again.